There's something strange about the fear of flying. It doesn't make sense. And the person who has it knows it doesn't make sense. That's what makes it so terrifying. Because it's not the kind of fear you can argue with. You can show them the statistics. You can tell them that flying is safer than driving, safer than crossing the street, safer than eating in a restaurant. They'll nod. They'll agree. And then they'll grip the armrest until their knuckles turn white the moment the engines start. This is not stupidity. This is not ignorance. This is something far deeper. Something that has almost nothing to do with airplanes. And everything to do with a truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Because the fear of flying is never really about flying. It's about what flying forces you to feel. And what it forces you to feel is something you've been running from long before you ever stepped on a plane. Let me explain. Think about your daily life for a moment. You wake up. You drive to work. You make decisions. You open doors. You close them. You choose when to leave a room, when to stop a conversation, when to pull the car over. You probably don't think about any of this, but your mind does, constantly. Because underneath every ordinary moment, there's a quiet agreement your brain has made with reality. An agreement that says, I can leave whenever I want. I can stop this whenever I choose. I am in control. That agreement is an illusion. You were never in control. Not really. But the illusion works. It keeps you calm. It keeps the deeper questions buried. Questions like, what happens when I can't escape? What happens when there's no door? What happens when I have to sit still and surrender completely to something I cannot see, cannot understand, and cannot stop? Most people never have to face those questions. But the person sitting in seat 14C, hands trembling, heart pounding, breath shallow, they're facing all of them at once, not because the plane is dangerous, but because the plane has taken away the one thing that kept their anxiety invisible, the option to leave. And that's the key. That is the entire psychology of the fear of flying in one sentence. It's not the fear of falling. It's the fear of not being able to run. Think about that. The person afraid of flying will drive 8 hours instead of flying for 1. They'll take a train, a bus, a boat. They'll cancel trips. They'll miss weddings, funerals, job opportunities. And if you ask them why, they'll say something vague. I just don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. I prefer to drive. But what they can't say, because they may not even know it themselves, is this. In a car, I can pull over. In a plane, I can't. And that difference is the difference between feeling safe and feeling like I'm about to die. This isn't about the vehicle. It's about the exit. As long as there's an exit, the anxiety stays quiet. The moment the exit disappears, everything they've been suppressing rises to the surface. And here's where it gets truly uncomfortable. Because this pattern doesn't just show up on airplanes. It shows up everywhere. The person who can't commit to a relationship because commitment means closing the exit. The person who keeps their bags half-packed, even in a happy marriage. Not physically, but emotionally. The person who always needs a plan B, not because plan A is bad, but because not having an escape route feels like suffocation. The fear of flying is just the most visible version of a much deeper pattern. A pattern that says, I can only feel safe when I know I can leave. And the terrifying question behind that pattern is, what does it mean about me that I can never fully arrive anywhere? Now let's go deeper. Because there's a layer underneath the control issue that almost nobody talks about. When the plane takes off and the ground disappears, something happens that doesn't happen anywhere else. In normal life, you are forced into absolute stillness. You cannot walk away. You cannot fix anything. You cannot do anything to change your situation. You are a passenger in the most literal sense of the word, and for certain people that passivity is unbearable. Not because they're control freaks, but because stillness is where their deepest fears live. Think about it. Why do some people always need to be busy? Why do some people can't sit in silence without reaching for their phone? Why do some people fill every second with noise, tasks, movement? Because as long as they're doing something, they don't have to feel anything. Action is the greatest anesthetic ever invented. And the airplane takes it away. 35,000 feet in the air. You can't clean the house to avoid thinking about your marriage. You can't scroll through your phone to numb the loneliness. You can't go for a run to outpace the anxiety. You're just there, with yourself, with everything you've been avoiding. And for some people, that is the most frightening place on Earth. Not the sky, their own mind. This is why turbulence hits so hard. Not because the shaking is dangerous. Pilots will tell you that turbulence is normal, harmless, routine. But for the person already sitting in a prison of stillness with nowhere to run, turbulence is the final confirmation of what they feared most. You are not in control. You never were. And now the universe is proving it. The grip on the armrest isn't about the plane falling. It's about holding on to the last physical thing they can control when everything else has been stripped away. And there's still another layer, one that goes even deeper. Some people who fear flying aren't afraid of dying. They're afraid of the space between life and death. That suspended moment where you're alive, but not in charge of staying alive. Where your existence depends entirely on someone you've never met, a machine you don't understand, and physics you can't verify. That space, that gap between trusting and knowing, is where real anxiety lives. Because real anxiety isn't about something bad happening. It's about not knowing whether something bad will happen. It's the uncertainty itself that's unbearable. And the airplane is the purest form of uncertainty most people will ever experience. You're in a metal tube, miles above the ground, and the only thing between you and the void is trust. Trust in the pilot. Trust in the engineers. Trust in the air itself. And for people who learned early in life that trust leads to disappointment, that depending on others leads to being let down, that surrendering control leads to pain, the airplane isn't transportation. It's a trigger. It reactivates every moment in their life when they trusted and were betrayed. Every time they let go and got hurt. Every time they gave up control and something went wrong. The little girl who trusted her father to stay, and he left. The boy who trusted his mother to protect him and she didn't notice. The teenager who opened up to a friend and got humiliated. The adult who gave their heart to someone and got silence in return. None of these people are thinking about those memories when they board a plane. But their body remembers. Their nervous system remembers. And it responds the only way it knows how. With panic. With sweat. With the overwhelming desire to get out, get out, get out. This is why rational arguments don't work. You can't reason someone out of a fear that was never rational to begin with. The fear of flying isn't a thought. It's a feeling. And feelings don't respond to statistics. They respond to safety. And safety, for these people, was broken long before they ever saw an airport. So, what does this mean? Is the person afraid of flying broken? Trapped? doomed to drive everywhere forever. No. But understanding what the fear actually is changes everything. Because once you realize you're not afraid of the plane, you can stop fighting the plane. Once you realize you're afraid of the loss of control, you can start examining where that fear began. Once you realize that the panic at 35,000 feet is the same panic you felt at 5 years old when the world proved it wasn't safe, you can begin to separate the past from the present. The airplane didn't create the wound. It just found it. The way water finds the lowest point. The way pressure finds the weakest wall. The plane didn't break you. It showed you where you were already cracked. And here's the part that might surprise you. The people who fear flying the most are often the people who feel the most. They're not weak. They're hyper-aware. Their nervous system is tuned so high that it picks up signals other people ignore. The hum of the engine, the shift in air pressure, the micro-expression on the flight attendant's face. They notice everything because at some point in their lives, noticing everything was the only thing that kept them safe. That hypervigilance was a gift once. In a chaotic home, it helped them predict danger. In an unstable relationship, it helped them sense the shift before the storm. But in an airplane, that same gift becomes a curse because there's nothing to do with the information. You can sense every vibration, every sound, every change, and you can do absolutely nothing about any of it. And that helplessness, that total, inescapable helplessness, is what breaks them. So the fear of flying isn't a weakness. It's an old survival system firing in the wrong context. It's your body trying to protect you from something that already happened, not something that's happening now. And understanding that doesn't cure the fear overnight. But it does something important. It replaces shame with compassion. It replaces what's wrong with me with, of course I feel this way. Because the truth is, you were never afraid of the sky. You were afraid of having nowhere to hide. You were afraid of sitting still long enough for your own pain to catch up with you. You were afraid that if you surrendered completely, the way a plane demands you surrender, the world would prove once again that surrender leads to falling. But here's what the airplane also proves, every single day, millions of times a year. Sometimes you surrender, and you land. Sometimes you let go, and you arrive. Sometimes the thing you feared most carries you exactly where you needed to go. The fear of flying was never about the flight. It was always about the fall you survived a long time ago. And maybe, just maybe, the sky isn't asking you to be brave. It's asking you if you're ready to trust again. If this video made you understand something about yourself that no one ever explained before, subscribe, because this is what we do here. We decode the patterns you feel but can't name. Hit subscribe. The next video might be about you.